Hi there. Welcome back to another episode of Tools for Marriage. My wife and I are super excited about this particular episode because we have roped our dear friends, Mark and Annette Manley, in to joining us on this podcast. And I think it's going to be a really good one because of their background. And I will let them share their story. I won't spoil it just yet, but I think you're going to get a lot out of it. So we're super excited to dive into this conversation. Yeah. So welcome. We're so glad to have you guys here. This is super exciting. We've been meaning to do this for quite some time, and I'm glad that we finally were able to figure this out. Have this great podcast.
This is amazing. Yeah. This is incredible.
Yeah. So this is awesome. So why don't you give us or our audience a little bit of background about yourselves and maybe tell a little bit about how you met or an early story of your relationship?
Sure. You want to start?
Oh. Yeah. Okay. So we met in 95. We were both working at the police department, and I had just coming out of a pretty messy divorce, going through a divorce, 2 young children, 1 and 2 years old, kind of making ends meet and just plugging ahead. And I'd made a promise in my own mind and my heart that, okay, God, it's just me and you going forward. I couldn't take any more heartache. I'm just going to raise my kids and we're going to make it work. And lo and behold, I get a new assignment with this new rookie officer that my lieutenant had said, I want you to take him under your wing and show him the ropes. And I'm like, okay, that sounds good to me. I go on a ride along that same day in this neighborhood of town that we were getting to know a little better. And the sergeant I was on the ride along with said, hey, I need to make a quick break into the substation. I get out and walk in, and there's a man standing there looking at some pamphlets with his hat on, and looks up at me, and I kind of felt this little jolt of something. Yeah, so I kind of took off into the conference room and, oh no, what did I just do? And just let it go. And he ended up following me and said, hey, how's it going? I said, hi, no big deal. Let it go. Finish off the ride along. The next day I'm in my office and I hear footsteps coming. And I look up and there's an officer walking towards me. And the lieutenant said, this is Officer Manley, young guy, I need you to take him under your wing. So I see this officer walking towards me. I look at the name tag and it says Manley. Uh-oh. Because this is the guy that I'd seen when I stepped into the substation, who wasn't in uniform at the time, so I didn't know who he was, didn't make the connection. So now we're kind of joined at the hip. And in the moment I remember thinking, oh Lord, please no, like block this, whatever this might be. So we tried. That was early July.
How long had you been in the department?
I had been there. So that was 95. I'd started in 92 as a civilian.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was a civilian. I wasn't a sworn officer. I was in the records department. Then I was at City Hall. And then I was now doing community relations for the police department.
Yeah, gotcha.
So he had an assignment of problem-oriented policing, it was called at the time. So we were both really pushing into the neighborhoods. So I'd been there, and I think he started. What year did you start? 94?
Yeah, just right before that, I had been working as a patrol officer, out of the academy, working the streets for no more than a couple of years, and then this new assignment comes up. Actually, they newly created assignment. It's the problem-oriented policing detail, and it was kind of geographically specific. So we had one officer that worked in the south end of town, and I was going to be assigned now to the east side of town. So part of this was to do community relations work and assist it was the crime prevention unit back in the day, assist them with town hall meetings, neighborhood watch meetings, just community engagement. So I was told, you're going to work with this unit, go get to know them. So hence the panned footsteps coming down the hallway, and then I met Annette, and I do remember that day. I do remember the day I was, in fact, I think I was at the Xerox machine or something, but I do remember Annette walking in, and it was like, whoa, and it just so happened, it was innocent, and then of course, a week or so later, it's like, we're paired up together. So it was neat.
Yeah.
Right.
I was a very young 24-year-old at the time, not just young from an age standpoint, but I was just a 24-year-old guy. I probably had no business being in law enforcement. I had a little bit of life experience. I was a military reservist at the time. I was in college, but it was. I was really I was trying to grab the world by the horns at that point, and it was just kind of neat timing that we met.
Right. Yeah. So did you have family that was in law enforcement, and that's what sort of led you that direction, or you were just?
Yes, no. So I have an uncle at the time was a longtime homicide detective for the city of Westminster. And I was always fascinated by his stories, but the job itself wasn't necessarily a calling to me. However, I did grow up, my dad was in the Army, and I did grow up with a sense of just patriotism, really a longing to serve. Yeah. And at first I thought when I was younger, maybe I'll go into the military to start off with. And then it wasn't until probably I was in college, a show by the name of Cops, came out.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, wow, that seems kind of cool. I'm like, I could do that. I had actually started working as a loss prevention officer for JCPenney's in the city of Orange. And basically my job was to catch shoplifters. Through that job, I got to interact with police officers from that city. And I'm like, well, this is kind of a cool job. And so the whole thing just really opened up my eyes. And then by the time I was really heading towards graduation in college, I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. And so I did. Yeah. I jumped in at the right time, got hired at a great agency, really, top shelf agency within Orange County at the time. And just things really couldn't have been better.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you two are now paired. You got to train him up in the ways of what needs to be done here. And so how did this sort of romance thing, any early stories from dating? How did it,
I tried
was it frowned upon within the department in terms of or?
I don't know if it was frowned upon.
Okay.
It wasn't encouraged, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I remember my, there were a couple other couples within, but it was always like, oh no. I know the top level, the brass was like, oh, it's just one more thing to have to worry about. So I understand that, just conflict of interest.
Yeah.
You had to make sure they could never be your supervisor, things like that. So definitely not encouraged, but there are a few handful of couples in there. And quick side, but it's hard when you have so much in common, especially if you're single and working together, and it's such a huge part of who you are that it leads to having that commonality. And I think it's an easy way to fall into a relationship.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, these people are the only people who really understand you in some way.
And it can also be a trap later too. When we talk about like boundaries and, not only out, with outside of work, with, how you engage or commit to work versus family, but also within the department and making sure that you're setting appropriate boundaries. But we started really just working together and becoming friends. I think we were friends for quite a few months.
I tried to set other people up with him. No, that's again, I try to block. So I went on for about a month and a half. And then we were at a shopping mall, kind of walking around, getting to know some of the business owners. And we get back into our vehicle and he said, hey, so when can I take you out? And I went, the panic, And I said, well, I'm kind of busy. I have 2 young kids. I got to check my calendar. And he says, no, I'll take you and the kids out. I went, oh boy, this guy's good. So we already had that friendship. We got along well. We were very comfortable together. So then we set something up for, a couple of weeks from then. Of course, it was going to be my birthday. So I said, hey, you get to meet my family on our first date. Why not?
Okay.
First, yeah. So the funny twist was, so the night before our scheduled date, he was going to be off probation. That's how you knew of an officer he was. So we always do a probation party for whichever officer is coming off duty. So I had to work late. I said, well, he invited me. I said, I can be there about 10 or so. I'll do the best I can. So I got there late. It was at a local restaurant. And I came in. I ordered a drink. I turned around and some lady I'd never met before said, are you Annette? I said, yes. She said, here's Mark's keys. And I heard you're taking him home and he's ready to go now. I went, okay. I was a little upset. I said, hey, I've had a long day at work.
So a little more context. I think there was 4 of us getting off probation at the same time. And it is, in law enforcement in general, I think it's a customary thing to celebrate an officer getting off probation. It's a big deal. The attrition rate for officers making it through the police academy, making it off an intense training program, and then making it through probation, it's there's a high level of attrition. So it's a big deal. So we were at it was Zuby's Dry Dock.
Yeah, it's a lot of celebrating.
And so we were there. A lot of coworkers, and I remember they just handed us like a roll of carnival tickets, and they said each ticket's worth a drink. So of course, what's happening when you were the focus of the attention, you're getting a lot of drinks coming your way. So anyways, at some point, I don't remember, but Annette came in and
that was it. I never sipped my drink. I got the keys. They pushed him my way and said, he's good to go. So we walked out, like, where's your car? Car wasn't there. There's no way he was going to drive. So I'm going to drive you home. Where do you live? He couldn't quite. So right across the street was a Carl's Jr. And he said, hey, my mouth is dry. Do you mind going through the drive-thru so I can get a soda or something? And I'm really upset right now. Like, I just want to go home at this point. I don't want to babysit anybody. So we go through the drive-thru. He's like, just pull over for a second. I just want to have, some drinks, a little bit of drink of a soda. So we're sitting there in my car, and he's drinking his drink, and all of a sudden takes a deep breath and says, looks over at me, we're about 18 inches apart, and says,
Like this, yeah.
Yeah.
There,
Looks at
right
me
there,
and
same
says,
thing.
I love you. I went, uh-oh. And he says, and I'm not just saying that because I've been drinking. He goes, I love you. I really do love you. And as soon as he says that, he decides to lean in for the follow-up kiss. Because haven't had our first date. We're
Right.
coworkers.
Yeah.
I love you and let me kiss you.
Yeah, the first date was the next night.
Yes. So he leans in for the kiss. About 10 seconds in, he's like, he backs up and proceeds to projectile vomit all over the interior of my car.
That's right.
Classy.
So I'm like-
Yeah, I really like to roll out the red carpet, and
This is my guy.
Yeah.
So yes, for whatever reason, I felt like that was the right time to tell her to tell her about the feelings I had bottled up, and it just seemed appropriate. In the parking lot of Carl's Jr. And I do remember leaning over to kiss her, and I was so nervous because I didn't have a track record of a lot of girlfriends. This was kind of a big deal for me, let alone to tell someone I love them. And I just remember kissing her, and the nerves just hit. And I could not get the door out open fast enough. And all of a sudden, I became very sober.
Well, everything is out.
Reality of the moment is starting to set in. So I felt I was going to be walking home, but it worked out. It worked out.
Yeah. So got him out, cleaned up. We went out, ended up.
You kept the date?
Oh, no. Yeah. So ended up finding out where he lived, dropped him off. And then, the next night at the date, of course, I had to tell all my family. So this is what happened with this guy that you're about to meet.
Right.
The poor guy walks in.
It was a scene out of Goodfellas. I walk into the room, and all the eyes are looking at me. I'm like, oh boy, here we go.
Your reputation precedes you here.
It's like, it's not really me. Wow. So, anyways, it was a neat. We had a really neat, kind of dating experience, and then of course with with her two boys, who I think when I met you, they were
1 and 2, 14 months.
Yeah, 1 and 2.
Wow.
And, they're now 29 and 30.
30, 31.
Wow.
30, 31. Sorry, 30, 31.
Yeah. It's been a long
So,
time.
but it was, there was a lot of growth in those first few years. And, we got married 4 years later.
Oh, okay. So you're 24 coming in, and you're saying about 4 years later. So by 28,
Yeah.
you're married now. But you've inherited an incredible spouse, but also these two little kids, right?
Absolutely.
And so insta dad, right?
Yeah.
And so, but it sounds like you kind of embraced these kids right off the bat.
Yeah, I mean,
They don't know life any different
I see.
without him. And just part of the beautiful part of it, so I was born and raised in the church. My dad was a pastor, married someone. My first marriage was someone who was not of the faith, who said, I'll become a Christian once we get married. And it did not end well. But going through that, and like I said earlier, it's like, Lord, it's going to be me, you, and my boys. If that's it forever, I'm good. I'm happy. I was at such peace with that from where I'd come from. Got my priorities back in order and straight. And it came to, the Lord stripping me of everything in that moment and saying, okay, let's do this again. Here we go. Let's get this right this time. So I was so focused and so in love with the Lord that when we met, I think that's kind of, I didn't want any distractions. We met, we realized we were going to date. So from that point forward, we've been together since. But I remember telling him, I know the feelings are there, but you need to know that it's the Lord, my kids. And if that's not in line with you, then I understand, it's no hard feelings, but I can't go away from that this time.
And how was that received by you at that time? Did you know the Lord at the time at 24?
Interestingly, and I just look at kind of the Lord's plan for all of us. I did not have any church growing up. But it was always something I longed for. I'm like, God, I really want, but I didn't know how to have this relationship with the Lord. But I just knew that there was a higher being out there, and I just felt like I wanted some kind of connectivity with that. It wasn't until actually I was right out of the police academy, and I had one gal I was dating. She was a Christian. I started going to church with her, and it really didn't take more than It was an old school Baptist church, and after about the third or fourth time going, I'm like, man, this is really I'm starting to feel it in here somewhere.
Right.
And within probably a few weeks, a month or so, I got saved, got baptized, and continued going to that church for a bit. Then we broke up, and then with I think just the pace of being a new police officer, I was trying to plug in at various churches in Huntington Beach area where I was now living, and it took me a while to really kind of hit my stride, and I would say it probably took me into my late 30s, early 40s to really understand what it meant to be a Christian man. And I look back, there's a lot of years where I'm like, man, there were some years that I really had missed opportunities as a boyfriend, as a husband, as a father. But all that to be said, God paired me up with the perfect person who was just so grounded in the Lord that she really, Annette was a partner but a mentor at times. Yeah. And the words that she would speak to me at times about the Lord just really resonated. And I recognize that's like, hey, this relationship, that I'm in now, this is very special because there are two little boys who were wonderful, and they kind of stole my heart from the get-go. Yes. But it was, the
timing was right, because I was in this path where I'm not going to have distractions, and he was ready to say, like, I need some help focusing. Like, how do we do this? How do we walk this life? So when I said that, he said, I'm there too. Like, let's do this.
Yeah. And I think looking back, I couldn't have done it without the Lord. And I look back, and that's really a theme, or I think when I look back my entire life, there's so many things that the Lord had blessed me. And it was that recognition of looking back. It's like, man, I couldn't have managed the career that I had as a police officer, as a police sergeant, lieutenant, captain, without the blessings of the Lord, without the guidance of the Spirit. And the same thing for my marriage. I mean, a number of times I probably tried to mess that up. But I think what always brought us back together, or not brought us back, I think what brought us back to the center was that mutual love for the Lord. And I think at the end of the day, and I can think of many things that we went through, health scares, just relationship, challenges. I feel like at the end of the day, we just lent into the Lord and just said, don't have the answers. I can't fix this myself. I ain't smart enough, Lord, or I don't have the power to heal her. We turn it over to you. And each and every time the Lord responded with blessing. And it's a magical, it's a magical thing.
I think the commitment and what we talked about early on, especially coming from a broken marriage or divorce, I remember saying to my ex-husband, if I'd known that divorce was an option, I would not have married you, because that's not the mindset that I grew up with, that I knew. Right. So that was so strong and such a healthy, how good can come from such the bad stuff is. That's where I was, and meeting someone and being on the same page, saying, we're in this is it. Like, no one's going out. We're in this together. We're on the same side. We're a team. We're a couple. That was so peaceful to get through every day. Challenges, whatever's going on in your life, knowing it could be scary, but he's not going to walk away. He's in this, I'm in this. And I think that's just that equally yoked, whatever you want to call it, where we're on the same team and we want this to work.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's beautiful advice for any marriage, right? First the Lord, right? And then asking him to carry us through. But man, this whole idea of serving as a first responder, of serving police officer, both of you, right? That is just a whole other level of craziness, right? And then you got these two little kids. And so I just think about all the pressures. You talked about some health things in the middle of that, right? Like, that soup has got a lot in it, right? So, take me through, kind of unpack a little bit of what that challenge looked like, because you're a police officer. One, I guess there's a little bit of connection. She gets me, right? But there's that level of pressure, that calling, can really pull people apart rather than bring them together. Either of you speak to what that was like.
And we saw it in being there, and we definitely saw coworkers, married kids divorce. It was really sad to see. But you can see it. You can see the whys. Not that it's justified. Just it's who they are. It's not just a job you punch in and punch out of. There's so much to it. There's so much you're exposed to. And yet, so I did see it. I would say that it helped that I saw it. I felt bad for the wives who didn't see it.
Right.
And I remember counseling or coaching them.
Oh, yeah.
Other wives around the same age or been married at the same time saying, well, he's late at work. He's leaving me here all alone. He keeps calling saying I'm stuck for another hour. Yeah. And I could say to him, that's true. Yeah. He's writing a report and the watch commander says, you can't just walk out the door in the middle of a report or an investigation. That's just the reality of it. Where Mark could say to me, I just got a call at 10:40 and I knew what that meant.
Right.
That means he's not going to be here for another couple hours.
Yeah.
So there's that little part of it where if you're the wife at home and I've been with the kids for 12 hours, I need some rescue here and it's not coming and my partner's not going to be able to show up and take over. It's very stressful part of marriage.
Do you think that, would you categorize the majority of these divorces that you saw as this sort of like, it's your job or it's me, in terms of like, you seem to care more about this than you do about me? I mean, do you think a
lot of it is just the stress, and the lack of communication, and I have a stressful job and I don't want to go home and she's going to be upset or nagging.
I see.
I know what I'm going home to because I've been at work for so long.
Right.
Which I think there's a portion of it. I don't want to overgeneralize, but infidelity sometimes.
I see, right.
You're in a career where you're looked up to in high esteem. I'm kind of a big deal at work.
Right.
I mean, a uniform.
From home, I'm not a big deal.
People think I'm important, right?
Yeah, right.
And I go home and it's like, take out the trash. Where have you been?
Right.
I think that's got to be something there, like without psychoanalyzing the whole.
Right.
There's something there that I'm a big deal when I'm in uniform, and especially I'm in a rank and people look up to me, and I come home and you're just dad, husband, where have you been?
Right.
And then if you're at work with, there's male, females at work.
Yeah.
They get me. They understand how important I am.
Right. Yeah.
And start sharing. I don't want to go home because of this. And you're sharing.
I see.
Which is always law enforcement or not, right? You're sharing to people of the opposite sex about how miserable you are at home and what a nag your wife.
Your heart is open. You're sharing your feelings.
Yeah. People are saying, wow, that's terrible. Who does that?
Whatever.
And that's dangerous for any career that you're in.
Sure. Yeah.
It's just it's a different type of career. It's not an 8 to 5. And the unconventionalness of it is the challenge, is that, it is a calling. It is a calling. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not for the, for someone who's just going to commit halfway to it. You have to commit 100% to it. And a lot of times what that means is you become impassioned about what you do. It's that service of community, service of country, whatever it may be. And it is a calling. But it becomes this thing, I think, that you have these competing priorities of your career, your obligation to the job, as well as your obligation at home. And it's easy to, when things are tough at home, to go to work and just go, I'm going to be the police officer today, and I'm going to go work hard and kind of forget about that other stuff. Or if you're you're aspirational in your career, and you want to take on the extra assignments, and you want to, always be the guy that says yes or the gal that says yes. That can now compete against the priorities at home, and I say that I fell victim to this where I was aspirational. I loved what I did. I loved the job. I always wanted to do something different and really just expand my horizons. But sometimes that comes at a price. And the price is, you're working late and you don't see your family as much. You're working weekends. You're working holidays. You take on extra things, and it's tough. And I think back where it kind of tips the scales of responsibility and roles within a marriage, where I look back and a lot of times Annette was the sole parent in the relationship because I'm out working and doing what I'm doing, but there's times where I could have been more intentional about I need to say no. Yeah, I need to make sure that when I am home, even if I am tired, to be there, be present, make sure that if there is conversations or discipline with the kids that need to be done, and that's not the one that always does it. Yeah. And these aren't lessons that I learned 25 years ago. I mean, these are lessons I kind of learned. I kind of learned, a few years ago. And I remember the latter half of my career coming home. And, I was in a position, I was a captain. It was a position where I was overseeing a division of the department, a large division. We were going through difficult times with the city, organizational contraction, really challenged to bring just a baseline level of service to the community with the resources we had. On top of that, we just had a lot of department or city politics and rhetoric that was really just heavy. It was a heavy time for everybody, not just me. But the challenges of that and the challenges of just trying to figure out how are we going to provide service to the community at an adequate level that's not even just adequate, that excels, because we don't want to just strive for mediocrity. So, but that challenge was difficult. I remember coming home, many days tired. Before I knew it, I probably had, a beer or two in me, and I just wanted to relax. And of course, I love my family, but I wasn't engaged like I should have been. And, my daughter, Sophia, was a little younger, and, there's just some missed opportunities, I think. But in those moments where things were difficult in that period of time is when I found myself I don't have the answers. I don't have the answers at work. I don't have the answers at home because probably there's tension between us because of this. And that's where I found myself just giving it over to the Lord and just saying, God, I can't do this. Help me. Help me figure out, guide me, open doors, speak to us, speak to me, speak to Annette. And at the end of the day, he does. And, and we're sitting here today. And but it is a difficult career. I mean, someone said once that being a police officer is like a front row seat to the greatest show on earth. And it really is. It is incredible. I mean, you see the best of humanity, you see the worst of humanity, and you are often just on the front line of just seeing the world through a lens that very few people I should say, get to see it.
Right.
And you take pride in that, and you want to be part of that, and you want to give back. But at some point, you have to strike that balance, and the Lord has to be at the center of your job. Yeah. It has to be the center of your relationship, your family, and I've seen through the years when that wasn't the case for me, that I was off balance, and I think where we've hit our stride is where we are in lockstep. We are leaning into the Lord. We're praying together wherever we're going through. And again, like I said, the Lord does not fail delivering on blessings.
Yeah. It's interesting because, one of the other things I think of, if you say, you have a stressful job, whatever, but say you have some surgeon and he's got to work a lot of hours or whatever. I mean, it can be, I love my job and I'm good at my job, whatever, and I get home and I don't have anything left to give, but the surgeon's probably not going to die. They're patient, right? It's a high calling, but they're probably not going to die. But the risk, right? When you have these little kids, when he's out, I mean, there were a couple incidents, weren't there, where, something about the canine, maybe you can speak to some of the stories or incidents that you remember of
that's
that.
The flip side. That's the flip side is the wife at home.
Yeah.
So the opposite to what is the wife at home, keeping things stable, keeping the machine going, making sure kids aren't worrying about dad, but you're worrying about dad. Dad comes home stressed and I'm like, okay, you need to engage, but then I'm trying to block the kids like, oh, dad's just tired. It's okay. Look away. Look over here. But there's the phone ringing at night. So I go to bed. He's working a late shift and the phone rings. It's your worst nightmare. So we would it took us maybe a couple of years where I need you to call me if you're going to be late. Because if I wake up in the middle of the night, you're not there, I'm panicking.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
The other side is
ringing.
The phone ringing and I'm panicking.
Right.
So we had to talk that out. Like, I'd rather have the phone ring you saying I'm stuck late than the phone not ringing and you're not in bed next to me. I think, oh no, someone's going to knock at my door. Those are the realities of it. Or when we were working together and, I have my police radio on and I'm doing a community relations meeting and I hear that he's in pursuit of someone. He's working undercover. And I'm talking and I can hear it. And when a police radio is on code 3, you're just hearing a beep. No one's speaking except him and the dispatchers, and there's a slow beep. And I know it's him. And then I hear him say, I'm in foot pursuit, and the beep's going on. And I had a sergeant who was parked in front keeping an eye on me. And all of a sudden from the corner of my eye, I see my sergeant walk up and he's kind of waving me. And I went, oh boy. And then I hear Mark's partner, not Mark, but his partner say, suspects in custody, but we need medics. I went, oh. So that's when I saw my sergeant say, okay, we need to wrap this up. And So I knew, and he said, yeah, it's Mark. He's on his way to the hospital. So,
Yeah.
you go into panic mode. And luckily, he did go to the hospital. It was the canine had taken a bite out of him, and
A large bite.
a large bite.
Where did he bite?
So he
He bit me right on the back of the arm, that tender part of the arm. The suspect had tried to hide behind a trash enclosure, and I went back there and grabbed him and handcuffed him and brought him out. And I was working a plainclothes assignment at the time, so I did not look like a police officer. There was, I was just jeans and a t-shirt, and I'm bringing out this guy who's wearing the jeans and a t-shirt. And we had a new canine at the time, new canine dog, and a new, fairly new canine handler. And the dog was just he was there, and he wanted to bite something. Right. He just knew there was a lot of excitement going on. He's like, I'm going to bite something.
This is it.
And unfortunately, he got away from the handler, and he jumped up and he just grabbed me back of the arm. And inside I cried quite a bit. But,
Yeah.
the other reality of his job is if he had to hurt someone, he had to use his weapon.
Yeah.
And we had that incident too, where there was a standoff, it was a hostage situation, and I'm in my police unit, I'm hearing it on the radio, and I get to the station as soon as I can. I hear SWAT's there, and Mark was part of SWAT. And I'm listening to the radio, which is slightly ahead of the news coverage I'm watching on the television, because the news helicopters were up. So I'm seeing it, I'm hearing it, and it was a tough situation. But I hear the SWAT sergeant saying, and I see Mark. I can see on the news, that's Mark, and he's really close to what's happening here. He's crouched behind a car. And I hear the SWAT sergeant say, if someone has a shot, take the shot. God, I remember just praying like, Jesus, don't let it be him.
So I'm not a great shot.
No.
It wouldn't have been well. The poor hostage.
But I remember just thinking, I don't want someone I love to have to take a life, because I know whatever would come from that would be horrible. So I remember seeing him, and I remember thinking, he's right there. And the sergeant kept saying, who has a shot, take the shot. And just praying like, no, don't let it be him.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I hear a different voice, because I was waiting for him to say, I've got it. And I hear another voice saying, I've got the shot. And it's not Mark. I'm like, thank you, Jesus.
Yeah.
And it was someone else. But there's that I'd never thought about in his career, that he might have to do that just in the line of his job. And how does that affect us? And
Well, how surreal, I think. One, it's unfolding on TV, but then you've got a little bit of early info about
Behind
what's
the scenes.
about to happen and behind the scenes and stuff like that. And you're like, this is all unfolding, but there's my guy. I see him right in the middle of this thing,
Yeah, and again, I think there's a little bit of advantage that Annette knows the culture. She knows kind of what's going on and what's unfolding. I think about the spouse who's sitting at home, who's watching this, knowing that her husband, or his wife is out there on the SWAT team, do whatever, or even just as a police officer. I mean, you don't have, it's helpless. You're helpless,
Right.
and then you got to deal with, well, what do I say when he gets home? What if he is the one that pulled the trigger? Do I console him? Does he? There's a lot.
space?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot.
And how did as the kids got a little older, right? And you're still in this thing, you're doing what you can to both keep the household running. And yet, how are they dealing with the fact that he's potentially in danger? Or are you trying to keep that from them?
I don't think the kids saw it as much as him being in danger. I think the biggest impact was he's just not around as much.
I see.
think that's what they felt more was Dad has an important job. And they love him. Dad's a great guy.
Yeah.
He's their superhero. Dad has a great job. He does important things. But the day-to-day life was me and the kids. It was the four of us. And I think most first responders' wives or significant others will tell you that the day-to-day, the dinners, because they work shift work, it never closes, right? So it's 24/7, holidays. Right. And every time he would promote, like he said, if you have someone who's aspiring to promote, every time he promotes, he's right back down at the bottom of the totem pole for weekend work, holiday work.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So you want to support him and encourage him.
Yeah.
But then in the back of your mind, I think, oh boy, if he gets his promotion, here we go again. We're losing him on the weekends. We're losing him Christmas morning.
Right.
So the kids just knew that's how it was. At the same time, myself and then the kids as they got older didn't ever want him to feel guilty. You didn't make my baseball game. You didn't
Right,
make
yeah.
my...
Yeah.
But you
it's
as the
not like I
wife
wasn't
are-
sleeping on the couch.
Right.
I was
Yeah,
doing my
exactly.
job. And so
But all they know is you weren't there.
Right.
So, but they still would reconcile that. And as mom, you want them to be okay. You're like, it's okay. But you're again carrying that, like, I really wish he was here. Or I know how sad he is out there not seeing him in the stands.
Right.
Yeah.
But we have to just carry that business as usual. And actually what was tricky is when he did have a shift that he was available, if he plugged in, it would almost throw us off. And I know the wives I've talked to, the same thing is I love that he's here, but then you're almost a little resentful because now you're going to plug into discipline? Or he'd come in and say something like, no, that's not how we do things, or that's not the rule. Or I remember
kind of
one
have
day,
a system
I
running
just disciplined one of the kids.
Yeah.
He'd been really acting up in school. And I said, you're on restriction. This, and he walked up and said, hey, buddy, because he felt bad he hadn't been around. I'm going to go buy you a new surfboard. I went, no. And I'm like, okay, at least talk to me first, because we're running this household every day, business as usual, without you, not to make you feel bad, but I have to. Life goes on, but you can't just plug in and expect that. So it's really challenging. And I'm sure that causes a lot of conflict.
Yeah.
If you're not, hey, let's go step in the room and get on the same page real quick.
Yeah. Well, there's a few things obviously that you brought up, and just in terms of some of the difficulties or whatever, what advice do you have for how you can navigate some of these things? Some of these things are just a level of understanding. Right. It's like, so then work less and be with your kids more. I mean, you can say that to some people. Yeah. You can say, dude, you keep staying at work until 6:30. You don't have to. Yeah. You could leave, but you choose to do that because you're trying to work hard, right? And it's kind of like, listen, you got to have a balance. In some cases, like I couldn't leave, right? I got to do this report. So what might you offer to a couple who's one or the other, both are in this first responder role, and you're trying to give them some hope, some guidance, some things to avoid? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just say, I think, whether it's police or fire, EMS, or whatever it is, I mean, a wonderful career. I truly loved my career. I would say is, you have to recognize your responsibilities. It is easy to get caught up in the excitement of the job, the career that you're in. But you have to, again, I'll go back to, life is easier with God. Always thinking about having God as part of your work life, your home life, I think will make decision making and the guidance a little bit easier. I think God will speak to you on when to say no at work, when to make sure that you are extra attentive at home when you need to be. But I think it's just the intentionality of, it's a great career, but you have obligations at home as well. And, we can go through, the checklist of, good communications. Annette and I don't know if we're natural communicators. And even to this day, I feel like there's times where maybe communication is we're not always kind of hitting on the same level. But the one thing that we did do early on, I think was the best thing that we did, and I would highly recommend, is pre-marriage counseling. And I think as we were getting closer to, and continued, I think as we, so for those who are, who haven't been married, or even for those who are married, the counseling is huge. The complexities of our relationship early on, and it was more of just, I think, me as a young guy trying to just rationalize and understand my role in the world. I always, I always felt like I was going to be kind of number three. It was going to be, the boys and then me in the relationship. And that just wasn't true, because a functional relationship, requires mom and dad to be on equal footing.
Right.
And when they're together and God's in the middle, everything flows down wonderfully. But I didn't see that. So I had some angst early on. So we ended up going to pre-marriage counseling. It was just some great revelations. It was just like, oh, okay, maybe you aren't number three. Maybe you are kind of number one as a co-parent. And through that initial counseling, I think some really great things came out. I know for me and for both of us. And then shortly after we got married, I think we went back and kind of a tune-up. And to me, especially in an occupation that is inherently stressful already, it is pressure-packed at times. Having someone like a professional that you can go and just talk to, because sometimes you can't have difficult conversations about your relationship, or difficult conversations about work with your spouse. But finding a way to have some conversation with somebody, a professional, that can help you kind of navigate this and just release the tension a little bit, and find ways to, like, okay, let's, we're here. We need to be here. How do we get there?
I think, sorry.
Oh, no. I was just going to ask, does the department provide that to you? Is that something that those services are kind of built in because it's such a high stress job? It seems like that's
not necessarily for like relationship or marriage counseling.
Okay.
There are other aspects of wellness and that they will provide for more work related stress and things like that. And that's public safety has come a long way in the last 10, 15 years when it comes to mental health and wellness. So I'm truthfully, I'm 7 years removed from the industry, but it is moving in the right direction. The officers, the men and women out there today, I think, are probably much more balanced in their approach, healthier in their approach than we were back in the day. And back in the day, we got off work and all the guys would meet at the local park, and someone would bring out a case of beer, and we'd drink a couple beers.
All better.
Go home, which seems kind of like the wrong thing to do, is drink a couple beers and then go home.
Right.
But it was the culture, and I think the culture has gotten better with some of that. But no, I mean, but there are plenty. I think the conversations around premarital counseling, relationship counseling, certainly, regardless of law enforcement or not, have just gotten way more mainstream.
Right. Yeah. You were going to say.
I think it's important for a couple, the person that is the first responder with their spouse, it's important to have kind of a temperature check in, like intentional, like Mark said, checking in, because the job is so much of who they are.
Yeah.
I think you as a wife and as a family feel like your second choice.
Yeah.
I think it's important to check in and say, I remember when his job got really stressful, even the kids said, we'd rather have him stop doing this job and live in a small 2-bedroom home than to have the stress in the home.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for them to say, I will give this up if it means my family. So I think it's important as the spouse of to feel like we're still what matters most.
Yeah.
Because in the day-to-day, what it looks like is this is your life.
Right.
This comes first. You're there until they're done needing you. And then when you have leftover time, it's the family. So it's really hard emotionally to not take that, as a hurtful thing, that you're not being chosen, that you're not as important as the career. Because it is that type of career. It's an anomaly. It's very different than most jobs. So I think it's so important, and that's part of the counseling, is for them to check in and say, how are you?
Yeah.
Is this okay? Because I would leave this for you if that's what it took.
Yeah.
Not it has to be that specifically, but it's important that your family feels that.
Yeah.
That you're my biggest priority, not the job, not the money, not what it provides, because it's provided a good life for us.
Yeah.
And fire and others in the industry. It provides a really nice life, but at what expense?
Yeah.
And I think it's important when you're sitting at home waiting for them to come home that you feel like you are still my number one. And I would give this up tomorrow if I needed to. So I think hearing that and feeling that, it's them taking that time to being intentional, like Mark said.
Right.
Just,
Yeah.
I need to check on my priority first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of akin to, I know Annette loves flowers and she loves receiving flowers.
Yeah.
But, I realize now that it's not just she loves the flowers. She loves the thought of me thinking to
Right.
bring home flowers. It's the same thing. It's like, you can take it for granted that everything is great, but there's even just asking the question of your spouse, like, "Hey, we haven't talked in a couple days.
Yeah.
How are you doing? What can I do to help you? Or do you need a break?"
Yeah. Are there things that you guys learned in pre-marriage counseling or in marriage counseling along the way that you use to this day, even though your job probably is still quite stressful, both of you, when I think about it, right? Yeah. But are there tools that you guys use that you've found to be super helpful to you?
A lot. The first thing when you asked me, he said, "You're not going to fight a lot, but when you do," you know what? He was kind of right. I think that's it. Well, and we just kind of go on with life, and then we'll have something, and then we'll have it out, and then it's like, okay, let's move on.
Right.
I think that for me, I need that moment. Like, let me count to 10. It's super important for me. I think I'm a little more hard on the sleeve. Get passionate, get triggered, and I might want to say something that I won't in 30 seconds from now.
I see. So your count to 10 is to avoid that flooding, that fight or flight response. Just calm yourself down so you're not saying things you don't mean and you're thinking rationally.
That's where we learned the pebble stone or pebble boulder. So Mark will lob a pebble in my direction. I will catch it like a boulder.
Yeah.
And that was huge. And just to talk that out,
Right. Yeah, good
it was a
analogy.
big deal. So I had to sit there and go, you know what?
It was probably just a pet.
He's not malicious.
Right.
He's not a
Right.
mean spirit. He doesn't want to hurt me.
He doesn't,
So he
yeah.
just threw out this little pebble comment and it landed on me like a boulder. Is it him or is it me? Like, okay, does it really matter? Is it worth the fight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that was the biggest thing is like, stop knowing that that's how I react. And sometimes I was like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Okay, give me my
Time, we'll
Remember, I need my
process.
time because
Right.
in a minute from now, I'm not going to be upset. You just have to give me that.
Yeah.
I think that was the biggest thing I picked up.
Yeah, I always want to. I don't like leaving an argument unresolved. I often will kind of push to like let's resolve this. Let's get past this so we can move on. And sometimes that just doesn't work. Sometimes we just need both of us just need a little bit of space. And we know each other well enough now that I think and as couples should, really get to know your spouse.
Yeah.
Sometimes just a little bit of distance, a little bit of prayer, come back together and talk about it. There's so many things in life, and I think about this, and we've talked with our kids about, there's so many things that our kids now just like they're stressed or panic about, like, the sky is falling. And I try to tell them, it's like, just take a second, pray about it, and I bet a week from now you're going to forget that this was
So true.
that the sky was falling, the biggest thing. And I think in a relationship, you have to kind of think of it that way: is not everything is the sky is falling. There is a way that things work themselves out, and that's where having a couple that is equally yoked, I think, in Christ, it just makes it so much easier. I've said this before, and I'll say it again: I couldn't have navigated my career, my relationship, being a father, without the power source of the Lord behind me. And it's just first and foremost, if you have a couple that is both devoted to Christ, I mean, you are light years ahead of the rest of the population that is trying to just gut it out. And gutting out a relationship is tough because sometimes you just get exhausted, and I think that's where people give up, and you have divorces, and and we've had challenging times, and I think our relationship is as strong today as it's ever been, and I give a lot of that credit to my wife. I give a lot of credit to Christ and what He's allowed us to do.
Yeah.
What did you say about the statistics, Laura? You were reading.
Gosh, what was it? It was 65 to 70% chance of divorce
among
for
first responders
and police officers.
Yeah.
And so that's really our heart. Our son is a fireman, and he came in just saying, well, if I'm going to be a fireman, I'm not going to have a great marriage. And I'm like, no, it's going to be great. And so it really, I think, was on our hearts of like already a marriage is difficult and challenging, and then to add this on. And so I think it's because you guys have a beautiful marriage. And I think, like you said, for all of us early in our marriage, we didn't know this. We put other things on top, or we didn't really have Christ in the center of it. And so I just love these ideas of kind of like, gosh, I went through this and I don't want others to. And so I'm so excited just for pouring into young people who are starting these careers, and being able to say, I can have a good, strong marriage.
And I think it's important too, because sometimes we'll joke about like firemen, it's boys who are still on a play date, because if you're a bunch of mostly men, predominantly men, and you live together for 24 to 96 hours at a time. You're barbecuing, playing
cooking.
volleyball.
It's always like what they're making.
Yes.
It's like,
So, and law enforcement to an extent too, you're 10 to 12 hours together with this group. I think it's super important to seek out in those fields other Christians or other like-minded. I remember telling Mark, it's important that the officers, do they know you're a Christian? There's something different, right? We all want there to be something different.
Yeah.
And if you're going through a stressful job and you have a wife, surround yourself with like-minded as much as possible.
Yeah.
Because they're there. Yeah. But that's such a huge support system. Because there's some things, again, I can only be there so much for him because I don't do the job. But if you have people you see he spends more time there with them than he does at home. Yeah. With like-minded Christian men and women. Yeah. That's huge. So I think it's important because you're away from home so long. You're part of that culture. Yes. There's, jokes and maybe inappropriate jokes, comments about the opposite sex. And if you're around like-minded people, you're not going to constantly, have those temptations thrown at you, or having people maybe not encouraging working things out with your wife.
Yeah.
So I would strongly suggest
Yeah.
find those people. We said when we were at the police department together, we had a Bible study group
That's what you're
that
saying.
we held in the basement of the police department.
Wow.
It was unheard of, but to look around the room, and it got to be a pretty good sized group and think, this is awesome.
Yeah.
That we all get each other.
That's right.
And if I needed someone, now I know who to go to.
Right.
Yeah, to pray for one another.
exactly. I would
think
highly
that's just
encourage.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that encouragement of being in community and being in community with like-minded people, right? So on your side, finding those other women, those other people that can encourage you, right? And so it's not a gossip group about this and that, and you're feeding in a negative way. You're trying to build each other up and lift each other up. And similarly, for you to be both a model and have models that you go, wow, that guy really navigates this thing, and that community, right? And it's not to say that we're not salt and light to the other people who are observing us, what we're doing and what we're saying, but to bolster one another and have those friendships. I think that's just beautiful.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something too. Is having a mentor, having somebody you can look to, especially as a man, and if you're a man in the throes of an early part of your career that's exciting and whatnot, it's easy. Like Annette said, you surround yourself with kind of like-minded people within that group,
Right, the driven people.
and you kind of forget what like normal is like outside of that circle. But finding somebody or a group of guys, men's group, a couples life group, it's for us. It's like, gosh, we kind of hit our stride with a life group in the last several years, as you guys know.
Yeah.
But that we probably could have used a little bit more of that earlier in our relationship. But you're at a point early on when you're raising kids and you're at the you're at the soccer field and you're so some of it is just timing.
Yeah.
But mentorship, connectivity with people outside of the industry. I really enjoy my relationships with the friends that we have that are not from that circle. And
You had a couple good mentors that were above you, captains.
Yeah.
You found out they were Christian men. You kind of
and absolutely seek those out at work who you aspire to be more like, And I definitely had some supervisors who were mentors. We had police chaplains at the police department who I think were the best in the business, who would come in at the right time and just pass you in the hallway and say hi. And it's those relationships,
Yeah. And I think as a community, for us, coming alongside families like that, and for the wives or husbands that are home to come alongside and say, hey, when you guys get some time, when you get time off, we'll take care of the kids, we'll bring a meal, that we who aren't running in the face of danger, that you are the ones that are like, if there's a problem, and like you said, my son being a fireman, it's like things I couldn't even imagine of what he sees. And so for us as a community to come alongside and to help families like you, to just say, hey, how can we help? How can we support? And how can we pray? I just think that is so, would be so powerful. And it would be nice to kind of, for us as a community, to come alongside families and couples like that. So,
Yeah, this has just been awesome. I appreciate your time, and I'm going to close this out in prayer. But first, I want to hear any crazy stories. I love stories. Anything that you guys want to share. I'm always like, there's just so many stories you have, little ones that you've shared that I like just think are awesome. So I'm just kind of curious to know if there's anything either of you think of that you might want to share about your time on the force that, you're.
Well, I could tell the one story. I know I've told it before, but Annette alluded to, we had that one critical incident where we had the Board of Education building in Orange County or in Costa Mesa, and it was a hostage situation. It's something like you would see that just plays out on TV. I'm on the SWAT team. I'm hunkered down in the parking lot of the Board of Education building, and we're getting fed information from police hostage negotiators. So, our negotiators were on the phone with this suspect for quite a while. It felt like it was probably 2.5, 3 hours. So we're getting fed information. So I remember I was with my sergeant, and we were knelt down in the parking lot, and we're ready to react if we had to. We've got our rifles, we've got our gear, helmets, and we're hunkered down. And the police negotiator comes over the police radio and says, hey, just want to let you guys know, he's saying he's got explosives in the parking lot. He's got explosives in a car. One of those cars is a white Chevy Malibu. And back in like 1998, it's like there wasn't a ton of Chevy Malibus around. Well, I'm knelt down, and in front of me right here, at the back of the car, is Malibu. and I'm like, what are the odds? And I look at my sergeant, and we just kind of smirked, and we kind of crab walked from out. And it's like, let's get out of the blast zone here. And it was so weird. It was we probably like crab walked over to the next car. But
Another Chevy back.
it ended up being that I think he had kind of mock explosives in that car.
In the one that you had seen and said, this is the Malibu he's talking about?
Yes. I believe, I don't think he had actual explosives. Right. I think they're road flares type, but I think he was trying to kind of ensure that law enforcement was staying back. Mm-hmm. And so he was feeding that. And sure enough, it worked. I mean, we
were one car over.
Yeah. So it was, it was one of those, I often think back, I'm like, wow, what are the odds? It's like, and it was just such a funny moment. We looked at each other like, I guess let's get out of here. So, wow. I don't know. I mean, it's such a great career. And I mean, anyone who works in police or fire have a million stories. Yeah. And it is, again, you see the best of society, you see the worst of society. Right. A lot of times in the middle, you try to find humor to try to help navigate that. The camaraderie is amazing, and it really is a neat. I mean, I think we're both blessed to have touched that industry and to come out the other side also, kind of one piece. And
That's awesome. Well, you guys are such an amazing example to couples, and what you guys have gone through, the stories you have are just awesome. We love walking alongside and calling you our friends, and I'm so appreciative for you guys being here and sort of sharing with this audience everything that God has been teaching you, and just super excited for you and your family and the next chapter for you guys. And so thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm going to just pray us out real quick, and then we'll wrap up. Lord, thank you so much for this time we could spend with Mark and Annette, and just the wisdom that you've given them over the years. Thank you for their hearts of service, Lord, their hearts that are subject to you, Lord, but to just want to serve the community in the ways that they have, the impact that they've made on people, those that they know about who have watched them, and those that they don't know about who've watched them from afar. But we've been so impacted by the love that they have for one another and the love they have for you, for their precious family, Lord. And I just thank you for the time that we could spend here sharing and telling stories and talking about things that you've taught them that might be helpful to the next generation of first responders. We're so thankful for those people who are willing to step into these roles, to move towards the danger as everyone else moves away, Lord. It's just a unique calling, but you've just you've pressed that upon the hearts of men and women to do those roles and to serve in that way. And so we're so thankful for those people willing to do that, Lord. And I just pray that we would be able to come alongside them, knowing the difficulty that they're in, both in the job as well as just maintaining their relationships, Lord. And so I just pray we look for opportunities to be a blessing to them, Lord. We thank you so much for your love, and we thank you so much for this time we could spend together. In your name, amen.
Amen.
Thanks so much for joining in. We appreciate it. We'll see you again on another episode of Tools for Marriage.